My name is Charles Warnken, just Charlie. I currently serve as director of the Regional and City Planning Division in the Christopher C. Gibbs College of Architecture. The Regional City Planning degree program dates back to 1947, and there are many people in this room that have been students and contributors to the program. For that, I want to say thank you. I would like to introduce our first speaker of the afternoon, the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing Mick Cornett. Mick served as mayor of Oklahoma City from 2004 to 2018, the longest serving mayor in the city's history. He has also served as chairman of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And during his time, while I could read many accomplishments, he played a key role in bringing NBA basketball to the community, oversaw MAPS 3, a voter-approved, sales tax-funded quality of life infrastructure program worth almost $800 million. And it is the direct tie between MAPS 3 and planning and placemaking that I want to just take a note about achievement. There are a lot of things being achieved in Oklahoma that are as strong and promising as anywhere in the country. Mick also participated in a very famous program about putting the community on a citywide diet, and this led to over 1 million pounds lost amongst Oklahoma City residents. In his 2018 book, The Next American City, The Big Promise of Our Mid-Sized Metros, he shares his personal experiences from Oklahoma City and lessons he has learned from fellow civic leaders around the nation. The book shows how cities of modest size have outsized accomplishments. Please join me in welcoming Mick Cornett.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
The next session will begin at 2:30. We want to leave just a little time for Q&A, so we'll try to end up at about 2:20, and I'll flag you.
Great, thank you. It is so good to be back on campus. Isn't this university beautiful? I agree. It has come a long way. And I always have flashbacks whenever I'm on campus to my undergraduate days. And it was on a stage very much like this, in which I participated my freshman year in the campus-wide Trivia Bowl. You could argue my entire life has been based on trivial principles, but specifically, I was getting my start back in my undergraduate days, and I was rapidly moving up the bracket in this particular contest, and I got to the semifinals, and we get down to the very end, and it's a nip and tuck contest, and the person who was asking the question says, "Name the most populated city in Tennessee." Now, just to prove that I've always faked confidence, I said, "Nashville." And he said, "I'm sorry, it's Memphis." And what I want to point out by that story that illustrates my defeat is that I was really just ahead of my time. Because today, Nashville is larger than Memphis. I've been able to speak in Nashville and Memphis and almost every city you can imagine since leaving office last spring. The release of the book, The Next American City, I think has really struck a chord. The premise of the book is that we have long had this impression that the biggest cities continue to get bigger, and that's just kind of the way it was. And that a young person who really wanted to reach their full potential almost had to go to one of those big cities because that was where people made and lost their fortunes and proved their worthiness. But what it quickly has appeared in the last 10 years or so is the Millennial Generation, and I know there are many in the audience that fit that description, as well as the generation coming in behind it, are much more likely to choose smaller places than the predecessors. And it seems to be because they are placing a higher priority on the quality of life that they would like to entertain. They're placing a higher value on things like traffic congestion, the cost of living, fresh water, clean air. And as a result, it appears that on a percentage basis, those mid-sized metros and even cities and towns much, much smaller are likely to gain population at a higher percentage than the very largest cities will. And all of that gave us an opportunity to talk about mid-sized cities in the book that had really kind of outslugged their weight and how they went about it. And the reason it was suggested that I be the author of this premise in this book is that because no city has come as far as fast as Oklahoma City. Now we know that that's because it had a long way to go. In retrospect, when I examine Oklahoma City from, say, a post-World War II day, it just seems to me like Oklahoma City was extremely value conscious. That's a polite way of saying they were cheap. They placed very little value or priority on design. It seems like from a government standpoint, if the city or the county or perhaps even the state could build something a little bit cheaper, they almost always chose the cheaper route. Now, they're using taxpayer dollars, and so that's not all to be dismissed. But the result of that was, by 1990, coupled with the economic collapse of the 1980s, Oklahoma City had pretty much lost the interest of corporate America. And if we needed one point to point that out, it would come under the leadership of Mayor Ron Norick. Let's see if this works. It doesn't. Do I have the wrong one? Is there?
Yes.
Okay. You know, in television, when something worked, we had this thing called the 1-inch drop. We would take whatever equipment it was and we would drop it 1 inch. Now, we didn't do that when there were engineers in the room, but that's the way the journalists did it.
Nope.
There we go. All right. So where are we all going to live with this urbanization taking place? And keep in mind, urbanization really just means, and from my definition, moving from a place that has more people than where you came from. And if you're growing up on a rural farm, moving to a town that has 500 or 1,000 people is a bigger place. So don't think of urbanization all as everybody moving to Delhi or moving to Mexico City. Urbanization is just moving to be next to people. And that's happening all around the world. By 2050, 70% of the human family will live in cities, yet 60% of these urban spaces have yet to be built. And that is our opportunity. How are we going to purposely build these cities? Because when you think about it, none of us live in cities that we created. Yet when we look forward to this opportunity of creating spaces that have not yet been built, we have all the opportunity in the world. We have no excuses for not building quality places that people will choose to live. So how we build these new cities is a key question for world leaders. Urbanization is the greatest force shaping our future. And I've rallied around 4 key principles to ensure growing cities provide great experiences, create opportunities, and drive innovation. And we're going to hone down on those 4 criteria as they apply to Oklahoma City. Well, I don't know why I always pointed at the screen when the laptop is over here. There we go. The 4 pillars for urban growth: economic strength and diversity, build wealth, jobs, and opportunity; civic pride and social cohesion, building places that people want to call home; creating a culture of wellness. Does anybody in here want to live in a city full of sick people? No, we all want to live in a city that values wellness. And strong, sustainable cities. And the word sustainable takes on a lot of definitions here. Walkable, active spaces. So we'll start with economic strength and diversity and our story of Mayor Ron Norick in Oklahoma City. He took office in 1987. He ran on the criteria as, we got to create jobs. Well, nobody was arguing in Oklahoma City. The economy was in shambles. Probably the worst economy in the United States. And as coincidence would have it, as Mayor Norick was taking office and getting his feet wet, along came the economic development opportunity of the decade. United Airlines was searching the country for a place to build its ever-growing fleet of 737s. Or I should say to maintain the fleet. It was more maintenance than anything else. But this was no small economic development endeavor. This was 5,000 to 10,000 high-paying blue-collar jobs. The annual economic impact to whatever community landed this opportunity was going to be $1 billion a year. And this was in 1990. Now, Mayor Norwick didn't have a whole lot of economic development tools like we do today. So he went out and he asked the citizens to basically build the facility for United Airlines. They passed a sales tax countywide that would raise about $120 million. And so we were just hoping to build a facility, and then United would come in and bring the jobs. Well, Mayor Norwick called United to tell them about this great plan, and United says, well, that's fine, Mayor, but your citizens will never vote for that. Well, United underestimated the desperation of Oklahoma City. It passed easily, 62%. Can you imagine? The state legislature holds a special session, and they put more money into this economic pile. $150, $160 million laid on the line for United just to say yes. Well, in Chicago, the United Board of Directors just can't believe Oklahoma City's incentive package. And so as the cities start to dwindle down, Oklahoma City remains in the pack. And because of the sales tax election, this was very high profile. Now today, most economic development efforts happen behind the scenes. But because of that sales tax election, this was front and center. I mean, it was on the headlines of the newspaper with updates. It was leading the 10 o'clock news. And as United called a press conference to announce who would win this opportunity, all of the Oklahoma City media were there, broadcasting live back to a group of Oklahomans across the state who had all moved to the edge of their seat because we had our hopes up. I mean, we'd been waiting a long time for good news on the economic front, but this kind of seemed like our time. And that's when United announced, we're going to build this facility in Indianapolis. It was about that quiet in Oklahoma City. Mayor Norwick, to his credit, did three things. First of all, he came back and held a press conference, said, we really don't know what happened. We really don't know why. But then he went to United and said, you got to tell us what happened. And United didn't really want to talk about it. Can you imagine? I mean, no sense in creating hard feelings now. It's over. He said, Mayor, you were the most prompt. You were the most courteous. Everything we asked for, you provided. You didn't do anything wrong. You just finished second. Mayor Norwick said, but we got to learn from this. We got to know where we went wrong so we can get the next one. And United reluctantly came clean. You see, it seems that unbeknownst to the people in Oklahoma City, United had sent down some mid-level executives and their spouses and sent them to Oklahoma City and had them spend the weekend and then report back to the board. And after reviewing that report, the board decided they could not choose Oklahoma City because they could not imagine their employees living there. The quality of life had sunk so low that we could no longer buy the allegiance of corporate America. Mayor Norwick did a third thing. He flew to Indianapolis. Now, he did not move there, although at this stage of his political career, he might have thought about that. And he got to Indianapolis, and he rented his car at the airport, and he drove downtown, and he just couldn't believe what he saw. There was activity. He saw a downtown that had hotels. Downtown Oklahoma City had one hotel at that time, and it was struggling. There was restaurants in downtown Indianapolis. There was retail. There were water features. There were sports arenas and sports teams. There was life. There was vitality. There was activity. The core of the city was vibrant. And Mayor Norwick knew what he had in downtown Oklahoma City. It was dead. There were still some jobs downtown in the tall buildings, but at 5 o'clock, everybody got in their cars and went those one-way streets fast as they could to the interstate to get out to the suburbs where they belonged. And in fact, the suburbs were quite lively in those days. The suburbs was where you lived. It's where a lot of people worked. It's where you played. It's where you went to the store. It's where you went to church. The suburbs were doing okay, and the city just got larger and larger and larger, but the core of the city was dead. We were trying to be a suburb of nothing. And that was the impetus for coming back and putting forth an initiative called MAPS. MAPS stands for Metropolitan Area Projects. Mayor Norick remembered that Oklahoma City voters had passed that sales tax, so he knew they were willing to invest in something. He said, well, if they're willing to invest and give it to somebody who doesn't even live here, maybe they'll invest in themselves. And so after a year of planning, the citizens came up with 9 projects that they would put in a MAPS initiative, 1 vote, up or down. The citizens either got all 9 projects or they got nothing. It was going to be a penny on the dollar sales tax for 5 years. It was things like a new library downtown, some improvements at the fairgrounds. There was a transportation element. There was some improvements at the convention center. There was this idea of putting a canal through that old abandoned warehouse district named Bricktown. Mayor Norick even had the audacity to believe that we could put water in the river. Now, many of you from out of town are probably confused by that because you come from a city where your river came with water. But having grown up in Oklahoma City, I can assure you we had a big ditch downtown, and the grown-ups called it the river. And I remember in middle school looking at my geography books and seeing the rivers of the world and thinking, that doesn't look anything like our river. But the idea was to build some low-water dams, impound water, and, you know, whatever happened after that would be icing on the cake. I don't think any Oklahoma City citizen ever imagined there would be development on the river or that would anybody do anything. We just wanted water in the river. They said we could fish in it, fantastic. They said we could put a boat in it, great. Maybe there'd be development someday, maybe. No one really put a whole lot of stock in that idea, but they just put some water in the river. Well, the MAPS election was going poorly. The polling was awful. Some of the projects were polling in the 20s as far as approval rating goes. As it got down the stretch, Mayor Norick kind of made a last-second plea to the voters. He said, look, even if no one ever visits Oklahoma City because of MAPS, even if no one ever creates a job because of MAPS, the worst case scenario is we'll have a better city for us. Well, it must have made enough sense to some people because on election day, 53% of the voters voted for MAPS. Now, it has almost been lost to history, but a year or two after MAPS vote, there was more controversy about MAPS than there had ever been imagined. It was behind schedule, it was over budget, and they had kind of overpromised, and they were certainly under-delivering. I believe that if the citizens could have voted again a year and a half later, they would have voted it back out. And it was kind of in the wake of that unsettling times that Oklahoma City is struck with the largest act of domestic terrorism in United States history. A bomb goes off downtown and 168 people are murdered at 9 o'clock on a weekday morning. Now, I think it's important to kind of take a snapshot of Oklahoma City at this particular point in time. This was a generation of people that had already been through that economic collapse of the 80s. They'd been promised hope with United Airlines and had that hope stashed. They had been promised hope with MAPS, and now here we were a year or two later, and MAPS hadn't produced anything of substance, certainly no positive energy. And now, kind of weighing on their collective shoulders was this enormous emotional burden of the Oklahoma City bombing. But it's almost as if something magical happened in that time period. It's almost as if the citizens of Oklahoma City grabbed hands and pulled each other up and dared the world to pull them apart. The unity that was created through those combined life experience was amazing. And it solidified the community. And as the MAPS projects finally started opening, the citizens actually had reasons to be proud of their city. And I would suspect, here we are just over 20 years later since the first MAPS project actually opened. We've kind of been running on that positive energy ever since. United Airlines is the best thing that never happened to Oklahoma City because that facility got built in Indianapolis, but then United went bankrupt. The jobs were never created in the numbers they promised. And you know, when a company goes bankrupt, that's not a good thing for your economic development incentives. If we had gotten United Airlines, we never would have done maps. And United Airlines had a lot of trouble down the line. We also diversified our economy. In fact, United Airlines was kind of an effort to diversify our economy. Coming out of the 80s, city leadership knew that we could no longer be as heavily reliant on the oil and gas industry as we had been. We can't allow these cyclical natures of the oil and gas industry to so affect our economy. And so we started investing 25 years ago in aviation, the biomedicals, and with Bricktown and some of the other MAPS initiatives started investing in tourism. And the idea in the early 90s that anyone would ever come visit Oklahoma City was a mistaken principle by design. But obviously today, Bricktown is the largest entertainment district in the region. 6 million visitors a year. The principles here that are synonymous in cities across the country are diversify your economy if you need to, and investing yourselves. Don't expect anyone from the outside to come invest in your city if you haven't invested in your city. Number 2, civic pride and social cohesion. When I was elected mayor in 2004, I started traveling the country to talk about Oklahoma City because I believed by then it was starting to become an emerging economic powerhouse. I could see a day that Oklahoma City was going to emerge and start to take its rightful place amongst American cities. My predecessors, Ron Norick and Kirk Humphreys, had done incredible work. They had planted all the seeds that were necessary. And as I took office, I really believed the city was ready to emerge. But I could also see a huge problem in my economic development efforts. The moment I said Oklahoma City, I could see it on the faces of people around the country. They could not help but break from that vision of the bombing less than 10 years earlier. I thought to myself, how are we going to build an economy on sympathy? This isn't going to work. We had been branded by tragedy. When you said Oklahoma City, you thought of the bombing, or maybe a tornado. But you didn't think of anything positive. And it's really hard to get people to come from the outside and invest in your city and help create jobs and help create your economy when they're associating you with all this negative imagery. And so that's when I started going to New York to visit with the commissioners of the NBA and the NHL, because my theory was that if we could associate Oklahoma City with something positive, they might think of a sports team before they would think of these horrific events. And so I went in the summer of '04 and then back in January of '05 and then made my third trip in April of '05. And that's when Commissioner David Stern called me the mayor who won't go away. And I'll never forget that afternoon. It was like April 18th of that year. And we spent 2 hours in his office talking about my vision of Oklahoma City and having a professional sports team. And he listened. We talked about every TV deal. We talked about every sport imaginable, not just his, but all of the others. And when we were done, he said, "You need to understand that I do not have a team for you. You don't need to keep coming." He said, "But I will try and help you get a hockey team, because I understand what you're trying to do and I think you can do it." And that, as I left his office, that wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, who ever heard of a crazy world where the commissioner of the NBA is trying to get you a hockey team? But it's better than nothing, right? And so I went back in the summer of '05 and started behind the scenes talking to our business leaders, trying to see which ones of them might be interested in a hockey team, or what teams might be available. Hockey was having all sorts of labor issues at the time. It really wasn't a good time for them to be moving franchises around. And then came Hurricane Katrina on Labor Day. And with my background in the news industry, I know exactly what happens when a hurricane hits a major American city. The water comes in on one day, and then the next day the water goes back out. And so as it came in on Monday in New Orleans, I woke up Tuesday expecting to see the water having retreated, but the water was still there. And then on Wednesday morning, it was still there. And we started to realize that this was an American city in peril. Much of New Orleans is built under seawater, under sea level, and had seawater taking up much of the city. And I remember there on that second day, watching their arena being damaged and realizing they had an NBA team and the season started in 6 weeks. They weren't going to be able to play in that arena. So I called Commissioner Stern, and it took him about 3 hours to call me back, and he said, I didn't call you right back because I knew what you wanted. And he said, tell me again about that arena. And so, indeed, we had opened the MAPS arena, and on a previous conversation, as I was bragging about our arena and it being NBA and NHL ready and we didn't have a tenant, he said, how much debt do you have on that arena? I said, none. We paid cash. He looked at me like I'd invented plutonium. He'd never heard of a city building an arena with cash. Probably never has happened before. But I realized the immediate benefit and the wisdom of my predecessors to pay that off with cash, because every city wants the NBA team to pay off its note, right? That's why you have a tenant, to help you pay off the debt that built the arena. We didn't have any debt. And immediately the business model looked really good to the NBA. I mean, we didn't want to lose money on the venture, but they didn't have to help us pay off a debt. We just needed a team to help build our brand and give our city something to rally around. Well, in almost unforeseen circumstances, we opened the season 6 weeks later, and the fans and the citizens of Oklahoma bought every ticket. Not just to the first game, they bought off the entire season by the time opening day arrived. 41 games sold out. Our corporate community led the league in corporate sponsorships in 6 weeks. Well, you can imagine that we're looking really good to the NBA right now. Commissioner Stern flies in November and says, you're at the top of the relocation list. Well, we know this team's going to have to go back to New Orleans, but you're at the top. Well, the team didn't really want to go back, but they had an ironclad lease, and the NBA gave them an all-star game to keep them a second year in Oklahoma City, but eventually, after that, the team left. Our business leaders went and bought the Seattle franchise. In good faith, tried for a year to try and get an arena deal up there, but no one really believed they'd be successful. And sure enough, a year later, they were free to move the team, and they moved them to Oklahoma City. And so when they were named the Oklahoma City Thunder, that completed the branding exercise. Because now people have something positive to associate Oklahoma City with. In fact, I remember anecdotally, a woman came up to me. It's been a couple of years now, but the story still works. She said, Mayor, I just want you to know that I get it now. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, when you wanted us to vote for that sales tax extension to fix the arena, to get that long-term lease with the team, she goes, I voted for it because I liked you. But I thought to myself, why do we have to do this? This doesn't really matter. And she goes, I just got back from a trip to Turkey. And she said, I got up and I went downstairs with my bags, and the person picked up my bags and said, where are you going? She said, I'm going to Oklahoma City. And he said, Thunder. And she said, when the guy carrying my bags in Turkey knows my city, there's something going on there that's very, very powerful. Indeed, the NBA brand has grown and prospered. I heard a story the other day, and this happened 4 or 5 years ago, but in downtown Beijing, there was like an 8-story banner that Nike had put up with one of our players, and it had the road jersey, said Oklahoma City on the side. Now I'm thinking to myself, if we tried to buy that type of branding in Beijing, what would that cost us? And here someone else was paying and doing it for us. Civic pride and social cohesion. Sports had always been something that divided Oklahoma. It had. Before the Thunder, you were almost identified by whether or not you wore red or orange on Saturdays. That's who you were. Oh, that's Charlie. He's an architect. Oh, he supports the Cowboys. Or, oh, that's Bob. He's a doctor. He's from OU. He supports the Sooners. You were described by which team you supported. It was really the first time when the Thunder came, it was really the first time we all could cheer for the same thing in the state. And I would suggest there's something powerful about that cohesion and the connectivity of it. Creating a culture of health and wellness. In 2006, we were placed on the list of the most obese cities in the country. And about that time, I was interested in the subject, and I got on the scales and weighed. And I weighed like 218 pounds. I went to this government website, and I typed in my height, and I typed in my weight, and I hit enter, and it said obese. Oh, what a stupid website. I'm not obese. I'd know if I was obese. And then I started getting honest with myself about really my lifelong problems with gaining weight and losing weight, and I would go up and down. And I realized, to my horror really, that 2 years into my tenure as mayor, I'd become an example of the city's problems. And at that point, all I decided to do was lose some weight. And so I'd lost weight lots of times before. I just started eating less. So I lost 1 pound a week for 40 weeks, and the weight came off. And about that time, I started looking at Oklahoma City for really the first time from the public health standpoint. And I was trying to figure out, why do we have a problem with obesity? And I realized that we had created a wonderful quality of life if you happened to be a car. If you were a car, Oklahoma City had to be the best place in the world to live. Everything we did, everything we designed, every building seemed to be revolving around the automobile. If you bought a house, it would have 2 or 3 or even more garages, and they would be the prominent architectural features in much of the suburban inventory. If you built a church, the most prominent feature seemed to be the automobile drop-off. Same with schools. And we built schools, and we built libraries, and we built neighborhoods, but we really didn't connect them. For the most part, there weren't sidewalks connecting public venues with houses. In fact, until the 1990s, Oklahoma City had not required developers to build sidewalks at all in neighborhoods. And they fixed it in the 90s, but the damage had been done. And so by the time 2006 came and we show up on the list of the most obese cities in the country, it all started to make sense to me. Now, at this point, I didn't have any idea what to do about it, but I did believe that whatever the first step is, we've got to have a conversation, because obesity seemed to be the issue that we did not feel comfortable discussing. And it makes sense. We're nice people. Obesity can affect the way you look, and, you know, we don't want to talk negatively about people. And so I could see where that strategy was getting us. And so I came up with an idea to really get a conversation going on obesity. And that idea was to go to the zoo, stand in front of the elephants, and put the entire city on a diet. Well, that's when all hell broke loose. We set up a website. 47,000 people ultimately signed up. It took 4 years, but we lost 1 million pounds. Now, the real long-term benefit of that whole program, and believe me, it was an awareness program. I cannot tell you that there weren't 47,000 other people who gained 1 million pounds. But the real benefit was we raised attention to the built environment. And we then went with MAPS 3 and provided some healthy amenities into that infrastructure package. Senior wellness centers, jogging and biking paths, sidewalks, a brand new park, that is under construction now downtown. All of that designed to build a healthier city, to try and get in front of the demographics that show the baby boom generation is coming. And the health concerns of America are only going to get worse, and the cities that prepare are likely to be better off than those that don't. Pillar 4, environmentally sustainable. What you've seen is Oklahoma City trying to commit to a more pedestrian-friendly downtown. We redesigned all of our downtown streets. I still think the only American city that redesigned its entire downtown grid to be more walkable. The one-way streets went to two-way. We narrowed the streets. We put down-street parking. And now we've added the downtown streetcar to add to the pedestrian friendliness of the community. Hundreds of miles of sidewalks have been constructed. And starting a conversation with health is extremely important to any city that's trying to proceed forward in the future. The summary of Oklahoma City: worst economy in the country to one of the best, millennials taking notice, consistently ranking now in the top 10 list for jobs, opportunity to build a family. We became a big league city. We invested in ourselves, and it is being embraced by a whole new generation of leadership. Now, this is a national and international trend as well. It's not just Oklahoma City that's taken advantage of these new urbanist opportunities and the idea of redoing your downtown. American urban reinventions are happening in all sorts of places, many of which you've probably not been to. Des Moines is doing an incredible job of rebuilding its downtown. It was actually ahead of us on downtown residency. They rediscovered their river. They took some old architecture that had kind of been forgotten and resurrected it. And they also remembered that, at one time they were a home and a hub of food innovation. Well, there may be no hotter topic in the world now than food. I mean, you can't watch television anymore without seeing all these channels about food and culture and kitchens. And Des Moines is able to capitalize on that. You should have seen the looks on the people recently in Abu Dhabi when I said the world's greatest urban park may be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was their reaction. Tulsa, Oklahoma. How many in here have been to the Gathering Place? Okay, more than I would have guessed. Isn't it amazing? Oh my gosh. It is truly a wonder. The economic development, the tourism that's going to be created, that is yet to be determined, but it's going to be astronomical. I think it will singularly be the best investment that philanthropy and taxpayers have made in our state in a long, long time. Columbus, Ohio is one of the fastest growing metros. A lot of Ohio is losing population, but Columbus is gaining. They're becoming a tech industry. They're adopting a lot of the urbanist policies. A lot of good studies available in Ohio, which cities are winning and which cities are losing. Columbus is winning. They hope to be the capital of autonomous vehicles in the future. Louisville's mayor, Greg Fisher, did something that, frankly, when he announced it, I didn't really understand. He said he wanted Louisville to be a city of compassion. Okay. I didn't really know what that meant or why that would be important necessarily. But I see now what he was trying to do. He started in his own city staff. Imagine every city worker believing that compassion was on the mayor's mind every day when they went to work, and how that might change how they conducted themselves and where they spent their resources. And imagine in the schools if every child grew up realizing that Louisville was going to be a city of compassion and that that was one of their responsibilities too. Imagine the power of that. Louisville's doing a lot of really interesting things. They're one of the peer cities of Oklahoma City and Tulsa. The future citizens are going to demand much more in the places that they choose to call home. And the question is, what can we do today that's going to create a city that can foster progress, build wealth, and embrace change? Now, I want to touch just a minute on this because people say, how are we going to pay for all that? And financing is something that a lot of people want to pretend somebody else is going to take care of. And a lot of times I hear myself being described as this enlightened Republican mayor. Sounds really good. But the truth is, we just figured out how to pay for it. It's not that the things that we've done in Oklahoma City were because we knew that they would be successful and others didn't know. It's that they couldn't figure out how to pay for it. Remember I said we paid cash? Well, think about all the cities and all the mayors that take office and find out they're still paying for the previous mayor's endeavors. It happens over and over and over again. Oklahoma City's been very creative in its financing. It's done an incredible job of properly using TIF, of properly using every incentive that was out there, tax credits, and of course that penny in the dollar sales tax known as MAPS is a model that a lot of cities around the country could learn from. The book is The Next American City, and I know we have some outside. Just got good news. 2 weeks ago, the publisher wants us to work on a updated chapter because they're going to come out with another edition in November. And so the fact when your publisher says that they want to invest more in it, that's good. That's good. The book is a third about Oklahoma City, a third about me, and a third about the rest of the country. And so it's an opportunity for us to tell the successes in Oklahoma to the rest of the world. So send one to a friend you know somewhere else. Do we have time for questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
We got just a few minutes for
Okay.
questions. I want to respect the time of our next speaker. Let's give Mick another warm round of applause. Thank you so much. If just to expedite this, we do have a few minutes. If you could come down to right here or right there, I will give the microphone to whoever has a question. If you really want to make me run up there, I will. Anybody? Any quick burning questions?
Someone's coming forward here, Charlie.
You mentioned, walkability in Oklahoma City, and one of the things you mentioned was going to two-way streets instead of one-way streets. Could you comment a little bit about the benefit of that?
Yeah, whatever the opposite of an engineer is, that's me. And so you can imagine all the humorous moments at City Hall when the engineers would try to explain something to me. And I remember one day they said, okay, so we're finally going to get around to changing these one-way streets to two-way streets. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that's going to take weeks. Well, it took 2 years. I thought we just turned the signs around, right? How hard can that be? Change the paint? Well, little did I realize all that goes into that sort of work. And I tell you, it's done a lot to improve the city. I'm amazed around the country at how many mayors want to do that sort of thing and they can't get their business community to buy into it. Change is hard. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're changing. I divide the world up into 3 groups. There's one group that will tell you they don't like change. And then when you change something, you find out they were right. They're mad. There's another group, and this is a kind of a perplexing group, because this group will tell you they like change. But then when you change something, you find out they were wrong. They don't like change because they're mad. And then there's this third group that will tell you they like change, and they really do like change. The problem is that group is extinct. That group does not exist anywhere in the world. Now, I'm exaggerating to prove a point, but making change leadership is a very undervalued asset in your community. And if you have leaders in your communities that are trying to change something, try and support them, because change is hard. Doesn't matter how positive it seems to you, there's going to be somebody that doesn't like it.
Other question? We have one right over here.
Thank you. I usually don't have a problem being heard, but I'll use your microphone anyway. You said that the arena was paid for with cash. Wasn't it really paid for with revenue bonds from the sales tax? What's the difference between that and cash?
Well, no, we charged sales tax, we collected it, we put it in the bank, and then we paid cash. We didn't build it until we had collected the money. There were no bonds.
Okay.
All right, question right here.
Okay, I first want to say my two favorite politicians started out as sports broadcasters. And, okay, does anyone know the first one? Mick's the second one. Okay. Anybody know who else as a politician started out as a sports broadcaster? Ronald Reagan, yeah.
Wow.
So you're in a very elite group, Mick, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But a question I had, earlier we had a speaker who really talked about placemaking and how important small local businesses were to placemaking, and I think Oklahoma City's been great, and their use of TIF financing, other types of financing. However, the one thing that I think is lacking, and I think we need more of, is how do we get the financing mechanisms, TIF, other things for the small guy instead of the bigger projects. Oklahoma City really needs infill to keep the city interesting. You know, when you have big projects, it's just not near as interesting as small, locally owned places that have so much creativity to them. So it's just a comment more than anything else, because I think Oklahoma City's done a great job of what they've done so far. But that would be my one thing to look forward in the future. So I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Well, no, other than if there's any way you can provide programming for small business owners to get loans, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think that is kind of an under-tapped, missing link. He's asking if there could be a TIF fund for that. I mean, TIF is generally used for infrastructure projects. And I would argue, I think, that all of the infrastructure projects, Project 180 and all those things, helped all businesses be successful. So indirectly, they were spent to try and make businesses successful. I mean, look at 23rd Street, for instance. A lot of small businesses there, and that was the result of tax dollars that kind of created an opportunity for them.
Okay, you've touched a little bit about diversifying the economy and social cohesion. So when I think about the Oklahoma City of my dreams, or Oklahoma of my dreams, it's a place where there's social cohesion in the sense of diversification and making sure people have a place at the table, across races, incomes. Can you speak to, kind of how you've seen that happen with Oklahoma City's progression and, kind of the highlights of how that's looking?
Yeah, I just believe that, God, there can't be a city that's more easily to be involved than Oklahoma City. And you just show up, and somebody will put you to work at almost most civic gatherings. I think at one time, Oklahoma City was kind of a closed campus. It almost seemed like, I mean, from what I've heard, was that, just a handful of people made all the really big decisions. It's never felt like that when I was around city council. And I think social media has only accelerated the opportunity for people to get involved and be heard. And Mayor Holt in Oklahoma City now, I think is doing a wonderful job of trying to make people feel included. It's not an easy task, but I think he's doing what he can. And I think in general, the expectation of inclusion and transparency have increased incrementally ever since I've been around government for the last 20 years. It almost seems like you can't be inclusive enough, you can't be transparent enough. And, and I think we're trying as hard as we can, but I mean, the expectations are pretty high in those areas. I think the mayor's doing everything he can, and MAPS 4 will be a great litmus test. Are people going to be able to rally around a group of projects, even if it isn't everything they wanted? Will they be able to rally around for the greater support and reach a consensus? That's going to be the critical key moment in that opportunity for inclusion toward a common cause.
Let's give Mick one more warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Charlie. You bet.